You already know what you need to decide. Some part of you settled on that answer days ago, maybe longer, and yet you keep returning to that same decision, turning it over, dissecting it, looking for the piece that you might have missed, waiting on more data, waiting on more certainty, some signal that finally makes the right choice feel safe enough to commit to. The frustrating part is you've made hard calls before. You've made tough decisions. You've built a lot of great things that have required real conviction. But lately on certain decisions, certain types of problems, you find yourself in this loop that you just can't seem to exit. And the longer you stay in it, the more it costs you. Not just in time, in mental energy, in momentum, in the quiet erosion of confidence that happens when you keep second guessing yourself on things that should really be straightforward. Does that sound familiar at all? In this video, I want to talk to you about what's actually happening when that loop shows up. And understand why it tends to hit high performers so much harder than most people would expect. And I want you to understand what it also tells you about the way that your cognitive system is currently functioning. Because at the end of the day, that's my background. I'm Jesse Hoffman. I have a decade of experience in performance and organizational psychology and neuroscience, and I help high-performing 6, 7, 8-figure entrepreneurs and professionals improve the way that they operate. Again, I have a level of closeness to this that is a big reason why I've plateaued and found myself stuck throughout some stages of my life. The first thing to understand is that the people that struggle most with decision clarity, they're often the smartest, sharpest people in the room. And I believe that it's really important and worth saying that directly, because most people experiencing this have already tried to diagnose themselves. They've landed on the overthinking, perfectionism, fear of failure, fear of rejection, over-intellectualizing. All of those labels feel plausible. And they're labels that I've used for myself. But they're also usually pointing at the symptom rather than what's underneath and causing all of that perfectionism, overthinking, overanalyzing. And that underlying system causes a number of different issues. First, decisions feel hard, and most of the time, the reason has nothing to do with the decision itself. It has everything to do with what's happening inside of that system that's supposed to be making the decision. And what's going on there in the brain is that when every option in front of you feels like it carries equal weight because you haven't prioritized and filtered them properly, when you can argue yourself into and out of the same problem, the same choice, 3 times in a single afternoon, that's a signal. Your filter for what actually matters in each given specific situation has stopped working. So without those filters, you get stuck in loops, really in loops of open loops, because you don't close the loop on one decision at a time to be able to keep moving forward. They all stay open and you keep bouncing around and you keep overanalyzing, looking for more data, all to avoid having to make the first decision. And that's maybe what's gotten you to where you are. The same cognitive traits that built the business become the liability past a certain level of complexity. The ability to hold on to multiple variables at once, pressure test every single assumption or every single angle, consider downstream consequences. Those are all real strengths, and they serve you incredibly well until the volume of decisions, the stakes involved, and the speed required to make those decisions all increase at the same time. And then some of those same traits start working directly against the process, because now you have a lot more responsibilities, more decisions to make, more people relying on you. And so that analytical mind that got you to where you are, you'll happily spend 3 days on a decision that deserves 3 hours, maybe 30 minutes. And it's not because you're indecisive, but rather your systems don't have a cutoff mechanism installed for when enough information is enough. And at that next level of business complexity or high demands in your job, career, profession, whatever the case is, cognitive speed matters just as much as cognitive quality. The two have to work together. And when they separate, you get brilliant thinking that never lands anywhere. And so all that value, all that potential leads to nothing. What's that saying? The most valuable piece of real estate is what? A cemetery. Because there are billions, if not trillions of dollars worth of incredible ideas that now lay decomposing underground. And what's happening to you is effectively no different. I'm curious just how much any of that resonated with you, because it sure as shit is very close to home for me. So if that feels at all familiar, I want you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button because our experiences are probably pretty aligned. My most recent video breaks down my clear diagnostic that I built for entrepreneurs to understand what dimensions of their performance they're falling short of. And that first dimension is cognitive clarity. And there are 3 distinct places where cognitive clarity tends to fail across all high performers. And they look similar on the surface, but they have very different roots. So I need you to listen to these 3 areas if you feel like you're lacking clarity in any way. The first area that tends to lead to a systematic failure is input overload. That's way too many sources, too many opinions, and no hierarchy for what actually matters in any given particular decision. And so when all of those inputs, when everything gets weighted equally, the signal, the thing that actually matters, gets buried in all the noise. And the fix definitely is not more research, more data, more analyzing. It's a clear filter for which inputs are relevant and which ones are just adding more volume. But going into the second distinct area where cognitive clarity fails, it's values friction. So you have input overload, too many things to consider and no way to filter them out. But then you have friction in your values. Sometimes a decision feels impossible because it conflicts with something deeper that hasn't really been clearly named or labeled. And so you could have a really logical case for one option, one decision. It could be really solid, but something keeps pulling against it. And that pull is usually a values signal, which is definitely not irrational. It might not be fully logical, but it's not irrational. It's values-based. It's your system telling you that the option on paper conflicts with how you actually want to operate or how you see yourself as operating. So when your values haven't been defined with enough precision, those signals become really impossible to read accurately, or at least with any true conviction. And so that third area that goes even a layer deeper than values is an ambiguous identity. This one shows up when you potentially are in the middle of a real transition in your life, a pivotal point when who you're becoming or who someone's becoming and who they've been in the past want different things. One version of you optimizes for security, let's say, and then another version of you knows you need to be ready to take the risk. But neither one has been given a clear authority over the other. And so you have identities in conflict, arguing with one another. And the decision that needs to be made sits kind of in limbo, in no man's land, because it's waiting for a resolution that is not going to come from the outside. It needs to come from within, from that layer of your identity, who you tell yourself that you are on a day-to-day basis, that guides the way that you take action. Because no matter what the task is, it is prohibitively harder when it feels like it's something that requires us to act outside of who we tell ourselves that we are. But when you can bring things within your identity and feel aligned with the purpose and decisions that need to be made, that friction melts away, and the same goes at the level of your values. And there are many different things that make up your performance identity, and that includes your values, but also the roles in your life, some goals and visions that you have. And I go into those in some other videos. But all of those things dictate the information that you hold on to, and the cognitive clarity, the cognitive ability that you can impart on any certain task because of the amount of energy that gets devoted to it, how clear that signal is. And so when that dimension of cognitive clarity, when it's functioning well, decisions don't drag any longer. And it doesn't mean that they're made without a thought, but it's cleaner. The thinking has a much clearer endpoint. There's a filter for what's relevant, what's not, a hierarchy for what matters most, which also leads to a state of internal calmness, quiet, to actually hear the answers that are already right there. And that's not to say that the goal with being cognitively clear is about having certainty in the outcomes of those decisions, because that's never going to be the case. What's available is clarity about the right move given what you know right now, and having the courage to take that and make that decision and take that step, because that is a different target entirely and is an attainable one, because ultimately it comes down to intention and choice. And so if you know that, every day spent in review mode, analysis mode, on a decision that's already been made internally based on your values, based on your identity, based on the system that you choose, is a day not spent executing. And over the course of days, especially weeks and months, that lag time in the deciding and the doing is a huge performance cost. But it's something that most people aren't able to calculate because it happens so deep underneath the surface. But okay, now where do I take this? Well, you're not going to rebuild cognitive clarity just by consuming more information. I've already made that clear, because the volume of inputs is usually already high enough, if not way too high. Clarity comes from deduction. What actually changes things is installing that decision filter, a clear structure for which factors carry weight in which types of decisions and what circumstances, so that the process has an actual endpoint. Instead of just running until exhaustion itself forces you to make a conclusion, forces you to make a decision and throw your hands up. And think about how cognitively and emotionally draining that is, and how that can affect your physical performance. And so the other piece is also getting really honest with yourself about whether your values have been defined with enough precision to function as a, real and true guide, or whether there's still just a kind of a general sense of who you are that shows up inconsistently, especially under pressure. And so again, that's the first place that I start. But if you just want to see where you actually stand on the dimension of cognitive clarity, as well as the 4 others, and just see your score, the Clear Diagnostic, it's ready for you. It's waiting in the link in the description, or clear.jessehoffman.com. It takes 4 to 7 minutes tops, and it'll give you a scored breakdown across every single dimension, and it's specific enough to be actionable. And most people who take this test, they'll find that at least one dimension is carrying significantly more load than the others. It's falling short. And that one area tends to explain a lot of the frustration that may even feel scattered across everything else. So the link to the diagnostic is in the description. So I want you to guess if you think cognitive clarity is going to be your lowest or highest score, and then come back and tell me what the results are. But whatever they are, the score is going to show you exactly what needs the most attention and where to start. So again, if you found this valuable, subscribe. See you soon. Peace.